Greetings, fellow students. Ann Webster here, and today we are going to be talking about the Louvre. Say it with me, Louvre. Okay, that was fun. But we are not going to be talking about its significance as an art museum. We are going to be speaking about it as a building from its humble beginnings to the massive structure that we know of today. Now, this is just a basic map of what it looks like because the complex itself is massive. So this kind of gives you an idea as we progress as to what was built when and where it is located within the complex. And here is another diagram that's perhaps a little easier to read and is specific to the people who were responsible for it. So, where did it all begin and what is it? Well, of course, it didn't start off as the huge art museum that we know of today. It actually began in the 12th century, around 1180 to 1190, and it was built by Philippe Auguste. And it wasn't built as a palace. It was built as a strategic defense for the city of Paris. And it was very basic. It just was 4 walls, square with some towers, to serve as a garrison and sometimes as a prison. So very, very basic. So 200 years later, when Charles V came to the throne, he looked at it and he thought, well, not a bad location. It's in Paris, but it doesn't really work as a royal residence. So he went about making it much, much larger, of course. So he added a new building, or started a new building that was about 300 meters away from the original and started construction on that. And also part of what Charles V did was he added an immense library, a huge collection of books. And so that was needed as well. Then, a few 100 years later, under Francis I, he also thought, hey, great location, but doesn't really suit me. So he actually tore down most of the original building that had been built about 300 years earlier, and he began construction of the West Wing, and as well as the huge famous staircase that is in the Louvre. His son, Henry II, began to work on the southern wing and also completed most of the West Wing at this time. So, and this is a picture of part of it right over there. Now, the Louvre under Catherine de Medici. Now, the reason it's under her name instead of the kings of France was because after her husband, Henry II, died, she exercised a huge amount of power. And so even though 3 of her sons were kings of France during her lifetime, the building and the purchase of the land for this huge portion next to the Louvre was actually credited to her. So she built the Palace of the Tuileries, which is here and in the blue roof, and also a huge, huge garden complex, which will be shown later. But after her death, construction stopped, and it wasn't really started up again until the reign of Henry IV. Now, Henry IV was responsible for what is called the Grand Design, which is shown here. And this is the building as it was at his time, and this was his idea for the addition. Now, part of the Grand Design was to link the 2 buildings, which would be the beginning of the main palace and then over to the east, the Tuileries Gardens. And he also had an idea for the Grand Gallery, which was going to link them. Now, the Grand Gallery is true to its name, and it is very grand. It is almost half a kilometer in length, and as I said, it links the 2 buildings which were originally set far apart because they were supposed to be 2 separate royal residences. Okay, so after Henry IV comes Louis XIII. He wasn't really known for much. He did a little bit. He added this pavilion right here in one of the central parts, and he extended parts of the West Wing. Louis XIV, and I know what you're thinking, Louis XIV, isn't he all about Versailles? Well, yes, he was, but at the beginning of his reign, he did actually focus a lot of his attention on the Louvre. What he did was he began to work on the eastern facade, which is probably what the Louvre is perhaps best known for, or maybe the most familiar part of the Louvre today. He completed the north wing that was started years ago, doubled the length of the south wing, and he remodeled and completed the palace that was done by Catherine de' Medici, because it had previously been burned and had to be renovated. Now, from Louis XIV through the French Revolution, not a lot happened as far as big additions or plans or renovations. Most of it was actually to the interior of the palace and not the outside. But a roof was added to the central pavilion and to the northern and southern wings. And there was a colonnade in one of the courtyards that was restored. Now, the beginning of the Louvre as an art museum, which still is not the massive art museum that we know today, was actually opened up in 1793. And it was very small. It was only a few rooms, but it was dedicated to art, and it was open to the public. Now, as far as the building itself goes, what Napoleon I did was he completed the wings surrounding what was called the Cour Carrée, which is just like the central square courtyard of the main building of the Louvre. Then we skip ahead a little bit to Napoleon III, who renamed it, wait for it, the New Louvre. I know, he must have spent countless sleepless nights thinking of that amazing name. But anyway, what he did was he completed the grand design that was started during the reign of Henry IV and never really finished. And he also built the Cour Napoleon, which is where the famous glass pyramid is now located. So nowadays, it is referred to as the Grand Louvre, and it reached historical significance in the late 1800s. So what we have today is a museum that has on display over 35,000 works of art, which is nothing in comparison to its archives, which are located underneath the building, and that holds more than 350 pieces of art. And so obviously the collection is rotated. So